Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. It recently came to my attention that I have a lot of games in my collection that were designed by the creative team Prospero Hall. I decided to pick 4 of those games to look at in more detail, and I let the Always Bored Never Boring club members vote on the order. Jaws came out on top and I've already posted a video about that, so today we are looking at the game that finished the poll in second place, Horrified American Monsters. You may recall that Horrified ranks as my 3rd favourite game of all time. It's a beautifully put together, streamlined, accessible co-op game with an incredible theme, and it's a love letter to the Universal Studios monsters. The artwork, the way the theme integrates seamlessly with the game mechanisms, it's all perfect. Naturally, when I heard there was a new version of the game coming out, Horrified American Monsters, I was very interested, and my wife purchased it for me as a Christmas present once it was available in the UK. Up front, there are a few important things to note about American Monsters. First, this isn't an expansion, this is a reskin of the same game. Different art, different monsters with different ways to defeat them, a different board layout, but the same game. It isn't intended to be combined with Horrified, it's a standalone product. Second, this game wasn't technically made by Prospero Hall. Prospero Hall did create the original Horrified for Ravensburger, but nowadays they seem to be designing games exclusively for Funko. That means while Horrified American Monsters uses the same game system that Prospero Hall devised, the new monsters and cards are the work of all new designers. Finally, Horrified's Rogues Gallery came from the classic Universal horror movies. Part of what makes that game so special is having the chance to battle timeless foes like Dracula, the Wolfman and the creature from the Black Lagoon, while protecting non-player characters that are instantly recognisable from some of the best gothic horror movies ever made. Even Abbott and Costello turn up. By contrast, American Monsters isn't about the horror of the silver screen, but instead the terrors of campfire tales. It takes inspiration from the American legends of cryptids in the backwaters, such as Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, and the Jersey Devil. I am a huge fan of folklore, legends, and all kinds of horror, so this is still a really exciting theme for me, but horror movies are pretty much the only thing that rivals my love of board games, so naturally Horrified appeals to me far more than American Monsters ever could. As this is basically a reskin of Horrified, albeit one with all new monsters that require different tactics to defeat, it's difficult not to look at it through the lens of that original game and consider what is different, for better or worse. But before we get to that, let's quickly run through the rules. If you've already played Horrified, there's nothing new here and you can skip ahead. The game is for 1 to 5 players, aged 10 and up, who take on the role of all American heroes, here called investigators, charged with defending their little town at the edge of the forest trail from a variety of cryptids. There are 7 investigators to choose from, and they will be facing from 2 to 4 monsters, with the number and type of monsters determining the difficulty of the game, ranging from tutorial through to challenging. And yes, if you master challenging level, there's nothing stopping you from adding more monsters. Go nuts. To set up the game, you unfold the lovely board. Just look at that. It reminds me a bit of the old Waddington's games like the Vampire Game and Bewitched. You place the terror marker on the first space of the terror track, and then you place the 13 citizens at the side of the board along with the 3 custom dice, which will be used whenever one of the monsters attacks. Next you shuffle the deck of monster cards. This is the deck that will tell you which monsters activate, what special events occur around the town, and where useful items will appear. Then you have to pick your monsters. For your first game, the rules recommend picking the Banshee of the Badlands and the Chupacabra, but you're going to pick Bigfoot, the Jersey Devil, and the Mothman, aren't you? Of course you are. Each monster has its own mat which shows you how you can defeat it. We'll look at those in detail later on. For now, just check the frenzy number in the flame icon on each mat, place the mats in numerical order, and give the frenzy marker to the creature with the lowest frenzy value. You then need to complete the setup process for each of your selected monsters. This is different for each one, and again we'll look at that in more detail in a moment. Then you shuffle the investigator tiles and give 1 at random to each player. Each player takes the corresponding standee and places it on the starting location on the board indicated on their investigator tile. Next, shuffle the perk cards and deal 1 randomly to each player. Place the rest next to the board with the other cards, as you may get to draw more through the course of the game. Finally, mix up the 60 item tokens in the draw bag and pull 12. Each item has a colour, yellow for physical items, green for survival items, and brown for animals. There is also a value indicating its strength and a location. Place each of the items on their specified location. You are now ready to begin. The aim is simple: defeat all the monsters before the terror marker reaches the final space on the terror track, or you run out of monster cards in the monster deck. For each monster you must first complete a certain type of challenge, which normally represents your investigation into where it's hiding and how to defeat it, and then you must hunt it down and beat the snot out of it. To that end, a player turn is in two phases. First, there is the investigator phase, where the player can take a number of actions equal to the action total stated on their character tile. The actions are moving into an adjacent space. If an investigator does this, they are allowed to drag any townspeople in their starting space along with them. Pushing one townsperson from the investigator space into an adjacent space, or pulling one townsperson from an adjacent space into the investigator space. Picking up any number of items in the current space. Sharing, which allows all investigators on the same space to freely swap items. Advancing a monster challenge by taking the advance action specified on one of the monster mats, and defeating a monster by taking the defeat action specified on the monster mat. Each investigator also has one unique action that they can use, except for the journalist, who just gets more actions than everybody else. These special actions generally allow investigators to rapidly redeploy or acquire items that are normally out of reach, so they can be as efficient as possible. Unfortunately, all of the investigator's special actions are recycled from the original Horrified game, so these heroes don't feel fresh or unique. That's a shame. Additionally, each investigator starts with a perk card, which provides a one-time benefit and are then discarded. A player can use a perk card during any investigator turn, even another player's turn, which adds a nice additional dimension to the cooperative play. Once an investigator's turn is over, they must draw the top monster card. These cards do three things. First, they spawn items onto the board. The investigator draws items from the item bag equal to the number printed in the top right of the card and places them accordingly. Then there is an event. The investigator reads out the event text and completes the instructions. Events are usually bad, and often they will spawn one of the townspeople. Townspeople have a target location they want to reach printed on their standee. If an investigator can deliver them to that location, by pushing, pulling and generally manhandling them about the place, they are safe from the monsters for the rest of the game. As a reward, the investigator gets to draw a perk card. However, townspeople left unprotected are at risk of being eaten by monsters. Should that happen, the terror marker advances one space closer to doom for the players, so there's a real incentive to keep the locals safe. The final thing a monster card will do is activate some monsters. There are icons at the bottom of the card indicating which monsters will activate, how far they move, and how many dice they roll to attack if they reach a townsperson or investigator. In this example, first the Jersey Devil will activate, moving 2 spaces towards the closest character, or staying on the same space if there is a character there already, and then attacking with 2 dice if it has a target. After that, the current frenzied monster will activate. If the frenzied monster is the Jersey Devil activates again. Monster attacks are straightforward. If they have a choice of targets, they will always go for an investigator, so it pays to stick close to the townspeople to protect them. The monsters then roll the number of dice specified. Each hit inflicts a wound. Investigators can discard 1 item for each wound to negate it, but townspeople have no way to avoid this damage. Wounded townspeople are instantly killed and the terror marker advances 1 space. If an investigator is wounded, they are knocked out and removed from the board and the terror marker advances 1 space. Then, on the investigator's next turn, they are placed at the hospital and can continue as normal. There is no player elimination. Additionally, the monster attack dice have exclamation points on them called power symbols. Each time a monster rolls this symbol, they get to make a special action as detailed on their monster mat. And we're about ready to talk about specifics regarding the monsters because I'm pretty much done describing the basic rules of the game. It really is a very clean, elegant system. You perform actions with 1 investigator, then draw a monster card, follow the instructions on that card, and then pass play to the next investigator. You collect items, save townspeople, and complete the objectives for each of the monsters in play. Simple. The wrinkles in the rules come from the way the monsters behave and what you have to do to defeat them, because each has their own sort of mini-game that will inform your strategy. And these are all new monsters with new abilities. None of them are recycled from Horrified, and that's the biggest draw for me for this particular edition of the Horrified game system. First up, we have the Chupacabra. Chupacabra is a hungry boy and wants to eat all the livestock. When it moves, if there is an investigator holding a brown animal token, the Chupacabra will treat them as the priority target. When the Chupacabra attacks, the players must remove 1 brown animal token from the board for each power symbol rolled. To advance the Chupacabra storyline, the investigators must save 6 goats. Whenever a player with at least one brown goat token is at the farm, they can spend an action to secure one goat. Once 6 goats are safe, an investigator can defeat the Chupacabra by being in the same location and using an action to discard yellow items with a total strength value of 6 or more. Next is the Banshee of the Badlands, which is a bit of a weird one. The Banshee is rolling around town singing, while accompanied by a skeletal violinist. At the start of the game, each player takes a violin token matching their colour and places it on the first violin of the Banshee's monster mat. Whenever the Banshee attacks, for each power symbol she rolls, all the violin tokens are advanced 1 space on the track. If an investigator's token advances to the last space on the track, they are defeated. The terror marker advances by 1, the violin token is reset to the first violin space on the track, and the hero starts their next turn at the hospital. To defeat the Banshee, the investigators must hear her song and survive. To do this, they must be on her location, and then they must spend an action to discard either a brown or yellow token. If they discard a brown token, they can roll 1 dice, and if they discard a yellow token, they can roll 2 dice. For each hit or power symbol they roll, they are allowed to move any one violin token back 2 spaces. Once all the violins are in the safe zone at the start of the track, the investigators can defeat the Banshee by being in her location and discarding any 2 yellow items. Next we have Mothman, a harbinger of doom. At the start of the game you take 4 items linked to 4 different locations and you place them on the Mothman monster mat. You then place a trap token with the closed side showing on each of the corresponding locations on the board. Whenever an investigator is on a space with a closed trap, they can spend an action to arm that trap, flipping it to the open side and discarding the corresponding item from the monster mat. Whenever Mothman moves into a location with a trap, it must immediately stop. Once all 4 traps are armed, the investigators can defeat Mothman. They must be in the same location as the monster and an armed trap, and they must spend an action to discard yellow items with a total strength value of 10 or more. When Mothman attacks, if it rolls any power symbols and there is a special demonic eye token on the board, all hits are ignored. Instead, the Mothman moves to the demonic eye location by the shortest route, ignoring traps and inflicting 1 hit on each character along the way for each power symbol rolled. Then there's the Ozark Howler, which marks its victims for death, dooming them with bad fortune. When setting up the game, mix up the 5 Ozark Howler tracker tokens face down and place 3 of them without looking on the monster mat. This is the trail the investigators need to follow to find the Howler. To reveal the trail, an investigator must go to the abandoned mine and spend an action to reveal the first token. An investigator at the mine can then use an action to pay the cost printed on the trail token and remove that token from play. There can only be 1 revealed token at a time, but as soon as it's removed from play, an investigator at the mine can spend an action to reveal the next trail token. And then, once all of the tracker tokens have been removed, an investigator at the same location as the Howler can spend an action to discard 1 token of each colour to defeat the beast. When the Howler attacks, if it rolls the power symbol, the targeted investigator receives a Death Omen token. Whenever any monster attacks an investigator, that investigator receives an additional automatic wound for each Death Omen token they have. The tokens are only discarded if a hero is defeated and sent to the hospital. The Jersey Devil is next, and this is a really interesting one because the Jersey Devil is the 13th child of a witch living among the citizens of the town. At the start of the game you remove all the townspeople from the monster deck and set them aside. You also place 3 of 7 clue tokens face down on the Jersey Devil's monster mat. Once per turn, an investigator at the City Hall can spend an action to play one of the townspeople cards. The player follows all of the instructions on the card as normal, and this counts as their monster card for the turn, so they won't draw a monster card after their investigator phase. Whenever a townsperson is escorted to safety, the investigators can flip one of the clue tokens on the Jersey Devil mat. Each clue depicts an item that will appear in some of the pictures on the townspeople cards, and any townsperson with that item could be the Jersey Devil. Each time you reveal a clue token, it will narrow down the possible suspects, and once you have 3 clues, you should know who the 13th child is, the only character who has all 3 items in their picture. To defeat the Jersey Devil, an investigator must be with the monster at the starting location of the townsperson who was revealed as the 13th child. They must then spend an action to discard items with a total strength of 14 or more. If the Jersey Devil rolls at least 1 power symbol while attacking, it replaces 1 face-up clue token with an unused face-down clue token, throwing the investigation into chaos. Finally, we have Bigfoot, which is really fun. Bigfoot doesn't want to fight, but he does like to rustle around in the bushes, scaring people and allowing people to take fuzzy photographs of his big hairy toes for his OnlyFans page. At the start of the game, you shuffle 5 Bigfoot photograph tokens face down and place them on the monster mat. Whenever Bigfoot activates, you don't follow the normal rules for monster movement. Instead, you check Bigfoot's current location. If there are no investigators there, you roll the attack dice. If you roll 1 or more power symbols, you advance the terror marker by 1 space and you flip 1 face-up photo token on the monster mat so it's face down. After this, Bigfoot will move. Note that if there is an investigator in Bigfoot space, you don't roll the dice. Instead, Bigfoot makes a break for it and immediately runs away. When moving, Bigfoot leaves a footprint token in every space he passes through. He will not stop on a space with characters, but will always move his full distance. If he finishes his move on a space with an investigator, he can move additional spaces until he reaches a safe location. To defeat Bigfoot, an investigator in a space with a footprint token can spend an action to collect the footprint, which allows them to turn one of the photo tokens face up. Any investigator at the high school can spend an action to discard any one item and attempt to align the 5 photo tokens on the monster mat. Each discarded token lets them make as many slide actions as the printed strength value on the token. Alternatively, discarding a token lets the investigator swap the position of any 2 tokens. Once the photo is correctly aligned, an investigator on the space with Bigfoot can spend an action to discard 3 green items of any strength to prove the existence of Bigfoot and defeat him. And that's your 6 monsters. There are some really interesting ideas in there. Bigfoot and the Jersey Devil in particular are very engaging, and I love the idea of setting traps around the town to catch the Mothman. But I don't think any of the monsters here are quite as good as the ones presented in Horrified. Which I suppose brings us to the Bigfoot in the room. American Monsters isn't as good as Horrified. Now I do need to be clear, this is still an excellent game. It benefits from many of the things that make Horrified special. Quick setup, accessible rules, variable difficulty, a creepy theme, interesting choices and fun little mini games that you can combine in different ways for lots of replayability. It's all still there, but this just isn't on the same level as Horrified. Horrified feels a little more polished, more complete and more carefully considered. Everything in Horrified makes perfect sense and it works really well, and everything connects with the theme. Simply on a presentation level, Horrified excels, thanks to little flourishes that aren't really necessary but which all add up to create a more immersive experience and which make you feel like everything matters. For example, the box art has lovely images of the various enemies, presented in a unique style. There's the Wolfman whose eye is the moon, the Bride of Frankenstein whose white streak of hair is the flaming torch of an angry villager, and the creature from the Black Lagoon whose gills are the ripples in the eerie lagoon's surface. The front cover itself shows all the villains arranged in such a way as to create a skull motif. American Monsters does the same box art trick, creating a skull design, but doesn't pull it off to the same degree of success. And the silhouette artwork of the monsters around the edge of the box is missing completely. As another example, in Horrified there are map overlays that indicate places of interest necessary for defeating the monsters you have in play. These overlays completely cover the location, replacing it with new artwork that makes it clear where special locations are while still making them feel like they are integrated with the main map design. In American Monsters, special locations are marked with simple square tokens with the game text on them. It doesn't harm the gameplay in any way, but it feels lazy in comparison. And while those may not sound like major issues, really they aren't. They are small things that stack on many other small things to form a slightly wobbly tower. American Monsters lacks anything like the visual flair of placing broken coffin tokens over the intact coffin artwork on Dracula's character board. All of the villagers you can save are simple stereotypes, lacking the immediate connection associated with popular characters from your favourite movies turning up. Even the board design lacks some of the original's ingenuity. In Horrified there are water spaces, only accessible to the creature of the Black Lagoon, and those spaces give you something else to think about. There is nothing comparable on the American Monsters board. And that's not to say American Monsters isn't trying, it still has some lovely graphic design. On the reverse of the board there is a map showing sightings of the various cryptids. The character boards look like pages from a spiral-bound report, and the rulesbook has the appearance of a top secret dossier from the Federal Bureau of Paranormal Investigations. And yes, the art in general is excellent. I think the board is particularly nice, and I can easily imagine wandering those forest trails or dashing through the streets to escape danger. And of course, this is at its heart the same game Horrified was. It's still engaging, it's thematic, most importantly it's fun. But it does feel like it might have been rushed out of the gate a little too quickly. I think nowhere is that more evident than in the fact that all the heroes in American Monsters are one-for-one reskins of the heroes from Horrified. It really wouldn't have been that hard to come up with a new selection of player skills to make this version of the game system feel even more distinct. Honestly, I would say the only real improvement here is with the miniatures. The new monsters are well sculpted and more detailed than the classic Universal monsters were. And so, as we get to the end of this video, it sounds a bit like I'm down on this game. That's not the case. The problem is, it suffers from its close proximity to a game I hold in such high regard. Horrified being so well executed makes American Monsters' lack of finesse more apparent. I still love the game, it's nice to have another set of monsters with different special rules running around a new map. And it does feel slightly different hunting cryptids compared to fighting classic Universal monsters. I just think this game could have been even more than what it is. Just like real life photographs of Bigfoot, aliens, or the Loch Ness Monster, the quality isn't quite what it should be, and you have to wonder why. But that's it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.